All right, so peace, seventh graders. Remember, I told you guys this was going to be our first Flip Classroom video. Okay, so if you look at the top, hopefully this is a review of something that you should have gotten in sixth grade math, but if not, we're just going to make sure that we have some fine-tuned skills that we're going to need. So the first thing that we're going to talk about on our Cornell notes is our topic and objective. So the first thing that you see, it says integers and graphing on a coordinate plane. So hopefully you have some idea of what an integer is, and maybe a graphing on a coordinate plane should be a little bit new. Okay, so our essential question says, how do we utilize integers to plot ordered pairs on the coordinate plane? All right, so if we look at the first part that's up here, let's go ahead and write a definition for what an integer actually is. So integers are described as whole numbers. So whole numbers and their opposites. So integers are whole numbers and their opposites, okay? So when we talk about the opposite of a whole number is a negative number. Okay, so the opposite of a whole number is a negative number. So for instance, if I give you the number 5, 5 is a whole number. So the opposite of that number would just be negative 5. Okay? So let's talk about some things on this number line that we have. So if you look on the number line, I have a number line that goes from negative 10 all the way to positive 10. Now you know on number lines go on forever. Okay? So right here is going to be my start. All right, my start is always going to be at 0. Okay, so all of my numbers from 0 above are my positive numbers. Okay, so everything that's from 0 and going on to infinity are my positive numbers. Now if I look on the other side, okay, from 0 and getting more and more negative, these are going to be my negative numbers. And my negative numbers also go on to infinity, but they go to negative infinity. All right, so those are my negative numbers. So when we talk about that, if I start at 0 and I go through my negative numbers, all I'm going to do is count and list them backwards. So we start at -1 and -2, then to -3, just going backwards, -4, -5, and then so on. So all we're doing is listing our numbers backwards with a negative sign. Okay? All right. So as we start at 0, okay, and if I move to the right, my numbers are getting larger. Okay, and if I start at 0 and then move to the left, my numbers are getting smaller. Okay, so moving to the right means my numbers are getting larger. Moving to the left means they are getting smaller. So let's keep on going with our notes and talk about a few more definitions. Okay, so if I look at the next part, it says something about an x-axis. So that's something that's very important on our coordinate plane. So an x-axis is going to be a horizontal line moving left to right. All right, so a horizontal line moving left and right. Now the next thing that is on our paper, it says a y-axis. So a y-axis is going to be our vertical line. moving up and down. So a vertical line moving up and down. The next thing that we have to talk about as far as a coordinate plane is concerned is called an ordered pair. So an ordered pair is going to be a point identified by x and y Okay, so a point identified by x and y. And then whenever we're writing an ordered pair, we always write it in parentheses. Okay, x always comes first, then we're going to write a comma and y. So when we're graphing from now on, we're going to have 2 points. Okay, so the first point that we're going to graph is going to be the x, and then we have to figure out what the y is. Okay, so if we keep going down, let's talk about what this graph means. So this whole graph is going to be called a coordinate plane. All right, this whole thing is going to be called a coordinate plane. So above we just talked about an x-axis and a y-axis, okay? So remember, our x-axis is that horizontal line. So this line that starts here and keeps going on over here, this is my x-axis. Okay, my y-axis is that vertical line. So starting up and going all the way down, this is my y-axis. Okay, so my x and my y-axis. So now, if you pay attention to the graph, I know that they're moving up and down and left to right, but these are just number lines. Okay, number lines, just like we talked about before, moving from positive to negatives. Okay, and we'll practice plotting some points as well, and hopefully this makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so also in a coordinate plane, whenever we have one, there are always 4 quadrants. So our first quadrant, we're going to label it Q1, is going to be right here. So quadrant 1, and then we're going to label the rest moving counterclockwise. So moving counterclockwise, that means that quadrant 2 would be right here. Quadrant 3 would be here. And then quadrant 4 would be here. Okay? So if I look at quadrant 1, if we have to plot an ordered pair, remember I said that x always comes first. So if I look at my x-axis, okay, and in quadrant 1, we start at 0, and then everything on my x-axis is going to be positive. Okay, so I have a positive x, and then everything on my y-axis moving up is also positive. So I have a positive y. So when I talk about the sign of the number, we'll always have a positive and a positive when it comes to quadrant 1. Okay? If I look at quadrant 2, all right, starting with my x on the x-axis, those numbers are negative. Okay? So I have a negative x. But my y's are still positive, starting with 0 and going up. So I have a positive y. So whenever I'm in quadrant 2, I'll always have a negative, comma, a positive. And again, this will make more sense in a second when we start plotting some points. Okay? So let's look at quadrant 3. Starting at the x at 0, these numbers are negative, and so is my y. So in quadrant 3, can you guess that I'm going to have a negative x and a negative y? So my numbers are going to be a negative, comma, a negative. Okay? And then next, in quadrant 4, my x's are positive, but then my y's are negative. So I'm going to have positive x, comma, a negative y. So that means we're going to have a positive, comma, a negative. Okay? So let's practice that some. Let's flip to the second page. Okay? Flip to the second page. And on the second page, it says, plot the following points and list each quadrant the ordered pair is in. So for the first quadrant, or for the first ordered pair, it says A. I'm going to write one in. Let's use the ordered pair 2, 3. Okay? So remember, we always said that X comes first and then Y. So what that means is, I'm going to start at 0, which is here, and then I'm going to go on my x-axis to 2, okay? So I'm going to move over to 2, and then I'm going to go on my y-axis, meaning up and down, I'm going to go up to 3. So this is my point right here. So this is the point 2, 3. So remember, I went to the right 2 because my number is positive, and then I went up 3 because my number is also positive. Remember, we said quadrant 1 always has 2 positive x and a y value. So this is going to be point A. Okay, so point A is in quadrant 1. So we're going to label that on our note sheet. So quadrant 1. Okay, let's try another one for B. So for point B, let's use -1, -2. All right, so this one's a little different. I had 2 negative values. So starting at 0, remember x comes first. I'm going to go over -1 times, and then on the y-axis, okay, -2, I'm going to go down. So this is my point -1, -2. This is going to be point B. All right, and point B is in quadrant 3. All right, we're almost done. Let's keep working. Let's try point C. All right, so for point C, let's try -3, 5. All right, so once again, we start with our x-axis, and since my number is negative, I'm going to move to the left. Okay, so starting at 0, I'm going to go over next to -3, and 5 is positive, so I'm not going to go down, I'm going to go up. So I'm going to go up to 5, and here's my point. Okay, so this is going to be point C, and point C is in quadrant 2. Okay, and then our last one that we're going to try is going to be point D. All right, so point D, let's use 4, -4. All right, so once again, starting with my x-axis, I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go to the right 4, and then I'm going to go down to -4. All right, and this is going to be point D. And then this one is going to be in quadrant 4. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to leave E, F, G, and H blank. What we're going to do tomorrow in class is we're going to come in and practice this some more and plot some points. I want you guys to jot down any questions that you guys may have so that we can address those concerns tomorrow in class. And then we'll also work on our summary together, and we can share out our say, do, mean summaries. Have a good night, guys.